There's a concept in economics called the butterfly effect, essentially a small action triggering consequences far away. Now, in this case, it's not a butterfly, it's a missile launch. A decision taken in one corner of the Middle East can ripple through global trade routes, energy markets, and investor behavior. And hey, can eventually show up in South Africa's economy through higher everyday costs. Now, here's how that chain reaction worked. So the first ripple isn't political, it's logistical. You see, ships have already begun rerouting away from these danger zones, and traders have now shifted their focus to the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passageway that a significant share of the world's oil and gas must pass through. And so when Iran even just hinted that it could disrupt that gateway, the markets didn't wait for confirmation. They priced in that risk immediately. And so that's what we're seeing now, a conflict sitting near the very arteries of the global economy. Now, the second ripple is financial. You see, if energy supply looks threatened, oil and gas prices rise. But hey, this isn't just about fuel. These longer shipping routes now mean higher freight costs. On top of that, insurance premiums climb. And so all these added costs work their way through the supply chain into transport, manufacturing, and food, and eventually inflation. So for South Africa, that means higher costs and pressure on a rand that typically weakens when global investors turn cautious. You see, in emerging markets like South Africa are rarely treated as safe havens. And so when uncertainty rises, money tends to retreat first and then ask questions later. Now look, this doesn't necessarily mean that global collapse is around the corner. It just shows how quickly one decision can move through a connected system. A missile launch leads to ships changing course and energy markets getting nervous at the same time. Shipping costs rise and oil and gas prices come under pressure. And those higher costs start feeding their way through the supply chain. And look, the world adjusts. It finds new routes, prices settle, and markets calm down. But it's moments like these that remind us that, hey, even these distant shocks don't always stay distant for long. South Africa is resetting the rules of hiring and firing, but not in the way you might think. You see, the new labor bill pulls in two different directions, giving employers more power and workers more protection at the same time. So Cabinet has approved sweeping changes to the labor laws that, for starters, double retrenchment pay from 1 to 2 weeks per year of service. Gig workers, delivery drivers, and shift workers will now be presumed employees unless a company can prove that they're truly independent, meaning access to union protection and the right to strike. On-call workers must also receive written contract with guaranteed hours and proper notice for cancellations. So in short, fewer gray areas and more formal protection. But here's the other side of that ledger. You see, employers will be allowed to dismiss workers without a hearing in the first 3 months of employment. Disciplinary processes have been simplified, and compensation for unfair work dismissals has been capped at 1.8 million rand for high earners. Furthermore, small businesses also get a 2-year exemption from bargaining council agreements. So yes, while retrenchment becomes more expensive, early firing becomes easier. So government calls it modernization, critics call it risky in a country where unemployment is already sky high. Either way though, the message is clear. The rules of hiring and firing are being reset. Last week we spoke about how pets are basically treated like children nowadays, which makes this next story rather unsettling, especially for pet parents in Gauteng. So RCL Food says that a limited batch of dry pet food tested positive for salmonella during its in-process quality checks. And so as expected, the products were removed from circulation and sent to a specialist waste facility to be destroyed. Now that should have been the end of the story. Instead, the condemned stock was stolen by our local Oceans 11 and is now being sold through informal channels like Facebook Marketplace across the province. Now, the affected brands include Canine Cuisine, Bobtail, Catmore, Optimizer, Bonzo, and Ultra Pet. Retail shelves, vets, and pet shops are not the issue. Those products are safe. The concern is heavily discounted stock sold outside formal stores. Now, RCL says that no illnesses have been reported so far. Production was paused and sanitized, and criminal charges are now being pursued. Right now, though, the safest move is sticking to trusted retailers and steering clear of unofficial online sales. And before we cruise on to our Bagel Bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, Spar is repositioning its Tops liquor chain as competition heats up, launching a new brand campaign while opening 26 new stores last year. Now, the off-trade liquor market has topped 100 billion rand, but expansion is slowing as saturation intensifies and rivals expand aggressively. Licensed bookmakers are pushing back hard against Treasury's proposed 20% gambling tax, warning that it could push the effective tax rate closer to 39%. The industry fears job losses and a surge in illegal platforms, while Treasury argues tighter oversight is needed. And the Proteas are through to the T20 World Cup semi-finals and now face New Zealand on Wednesday. After an unbeaten run, they'll be chasing a place in the final against a side that has historically had an edge in ICC knockouts. And on to our bagel bite of the day. Let's see what you got. The question is, which particle carries the electromagnetic force? Is it A, electron, B, photon, or C, neutron? We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. So I want to take a moment to tell you how Daily Bagel makes money. Now, I know that might sound pretty strange, but given that we're a company providing you with daily news, I believe that transparency is important. And so up until now, we've largely funded this business ourselves. And as we grow though, we need a model that keeps both the lights on and also keeps Daily Bagel free. And so therefore that model is advertising rather than paywalls. Now there are two main types. The first is a traditional sponsor, a brand that backs the show, like proudly brought to you by whoever. And look, we're open to that, but only if it genuinely fits. And we haven't found the right long-term match just yet. Now, the second is paid media. That's when a company wants to make a PR announcement, to create more exposure around a new product or a campaign, something along those lines. And most major media companies run these in some form. And for Daily Bagel, it's the most straightforward model. But here's what matters. We choose what runs. Our service agreements are clear. We can reject pieces and brands don't get to dictate opinion or framing. They may simply review the scripts for factual accuracy or specific terminology. For example, how a product can be legally described. That's about it. Furthermore, we disclose each one either in the video, the description, or both. Out of the 30 pieces of content that we post every single week, at max 2 will be paid media. And for me, this is the most important part. Only if we believe that it's genuinely relevant, useful, or entertaining to you. And so if it doesn't add value, we don't run it. Working with aligned brands allows us to keep this thing free, bring you value, and keep improving what we build. But I'll say this once and I'll say this plainly. Your trust matters more than any single campaign, and you can hold me to my word on that. South Africa doesn't just have a housing problem, it also has a waste problem. And one UCT student has set about solving both problems at once. So according to UCT News, Matimba Mabonda, a master's student of chemical engineering, teamed up with his father in Innervale to construct a home made from natural earth mixed with glass and plastic waste. More than 90% of the walls are made from these materials. It took less than a month to build, includes a kitchen, bathroom, and garage, and looks like every other brick house on the street. The only difference is that it naturally regulates temperature, staying comfortable without needing fans, air cons, or heaters between the seasons. Now, what's most moving about this story is that Mabonda grew up in a shack in the same area. And instead of waiting for a housing solution, he built one, founding his startup, Lola Green, that turns landfill waste into construction material. South Africa already generates around 122 million tons of waste a year. And so even if just a fraction of that becomes homes instead of landfill, this stops becoming a feel-good story and starts becoming a very real blueprint. And as for that bagel bite, the answer is photons, the particles that carry the electromagnetic force. The force behind light, electricity, and magnets. Electrons have charge, so they're affected by force, but they don't carry it, while neutrons are neutral, so they're not involved here. You probably knew that already. And my friends, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you guys have all had a cracker start to the week. Remember, be kind to one another, and we'll catch you all tomorrow for the next round of the good stuff. God bless.